The African community is a very important community here. It's important, as believe Johnny, because for me, it doesn't matter where you come from. It's important that the African community feel that sense of empowerment and the belief that they have equal rights here as Australians to all the full opportunities that are available to anyone.
Hi, Clyde Salu-Mushirati here from Africa Media Australia. About a month ago, we published an interview by the current chairperson of the Victorian Multicultural Commission, Mr. Chin Tan. In that interview, Mr. Chin Tan spoke about the role of his agency, namely the fact that it assists a lot of communities by providing funding for festivals and a variety of programs that are important for the communities. In the second part of the interview that we're going to be offering you through this video, Mr. Chin Tan talks about some of the criticisms that are heard from community circles. He also spoke about issues regarding the youth, as well as some of the issues we've heard recently regarding communities and the police. Overall, Mr. Chin Tan draws a very clear picture of what the role of his agency is and how community leaders and anyone interested in community development can benefit from the work that the VMC does in our community. I'll let you watch this. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the criticisms that you hear from time to time about VMC. Not that they necessarily relate to you because you've only been in this position for about a year. You hear from some people that it's just VMC finances parties. They give money for people to do parties and that's pretty much it.
Well, I'll put it this way. We do it not because we're out there to give people a good time. We do it because it's important to support communities. When we do that, we're clear criteria what the expectation is. The whole idea is to support communities so that they can then express their own cultural inheritances, right? And if they're not doing that, then it defeats the purpose. So we do have clear criteria about how the funding goes. The role we play is critical because we act as a conduit with government. When, for example, you look at police issues, and I know you'll come to that shortly, there's no funding element in police issues. We are out there in the community with the police. I've sat with the police. I have dialogue and communications with Ken Lay and his Cartwright. And I deal with them on those levels that regards issues. And we had meetings before with community leaders from African communities as well. These aren't funding issues, but these are serious issues. And we put the police, we indicate to them very clearly that it's important that they get it right in the multicultural area. And we did say, if we come to the conclusion that we need to look into this more seriously, we will in fact do a research and we'll do investigation and we'll report on those matters, as we can with any department of health, communications. We have access. If nothing else, we can get the attention of government and departments and communities out there about what needs to be done, and that's an important area.
Another sort of criticism you hear from time to time is that, and this doesn't just apply for VMC alone, it applies for many other service providers, and some community leaders say that, in fact, a number of service providers, including VMC, may contribute to a division within the communities, because sometimes people break up, and I guess you can't avoid this when people are together, but there's a lot of split and division in the community because the small groups know that if they come to VMC or go to this specific service provider, they will receive some funding.
Well, I'm not sure it's entirely correct. I mean, I don't tick boxes because I'm not government. So I don't have those issues here, but I'm very intimately concerned, and this is ultimately my responsibility to ensure that we are a cohesive, harmonious community, and the whole concept of citizenship is very important. The government is in fact investing in a lot of programs to make sure we understand the concept of citizenship. For me, my message is very central. We're not into diversity for the sake of it, for the fun of it. We don't go around the world saying come because we want a color, we want a spectrum, we want everything here because it looks good. But I do have concern, and I've got this concept that we need to join the dots. These are the different communities. If we don't join the dots, we got an issue.
Yeah, I guess very specifically, what I'm referring to is, let's say you take a small community such as my community, the Congolese community. The number of Congolese is possibly less than 1,000 in Victoria. I don't have the right numbers, but then you can have 5, 6 small groups. There are no question asked with regards to how money is being distributed and if that is encouraging cohesiveness or division. That's what
We're saying we have 25 Congolese Independence Day function in 1 month. Now, we can be really concerned about why is that so for a group, it's less than 2,000 strong. That means, how is it going to manufacture itself? Even with the Chinese community, I said, how many Chinese New Year do you want? Function do you want? And we say to them, no, if you have 14, it's not going to work. We can't fund 14. So it gets to a point where it's not going to work. Now, 2 groups could be manageable, and there could be reasons for it. But I think at some point, the whole idea is not manufacturing groups like that. The groups already exist on their own. It's already out there. But we don't want to isolate groups by saying we can't support you until you come together. That might even be a bigger problem to put together and clash the heads when there is really no basis for that. And then we'll be accused saying, well, what's VMC doing, putting conflicting groups together who can't sit together in the same room. So we say, fine, we'll do that, but in due course we expect a merger of some sort. That's the reason why we're saying we will put in more money for bigger groups, combined groups. And if African communities want to do that, that's the reason why when the football team goes up there, 14 players from all background, that's a beautiful thing to see. But we're not pushing it to a point of isolating and alienating communities, because sometimes they've got their own reasons to be where they are. And we want to be slowly able to work with them to a point where they feel comfortable in moving. And this is where the African community leadership is important. This is where it's not a case of what we're doing. So what are you doing for yourself in your own community? And you raised it, and I appreciate it. Thank you for doing that, because then the question is this: what are the communities doing for themselves to try and merge and then not, split on those bases? Now, if you come to me and say, Chin, don't give groups money like that, we'll bring them together in one party. I said to you, Clyde, thank you. I'll do it, tomorrow. But it's not there yet. So,
but then we see very little of, although I understand you said you don't have any programs, but on that level, if there is some understanding that there is this issue of division for smaller groups that would possibly be better if they were together, there's very little in terms of trying to encourage that cohesiveness. Is there anything that is in place that tries to, I know it's a difficult question, it's not easy as that, but is there anything that you guys have in place to try and address that?
Well, if you look at the funding criteria, the priorities towards combined groups that represent a more holistic, picture. But we also recognize we just can't push people to come together and be friends if they're not there yet. But the ultimate desire is for that to happen. So we look at programs. We sit back and we look at programs we produce. The whole idea is to produce a holistic, generic community groups. Well, we recognize obviously African. We just can't put Congolese and Nigerian just because they happen to be Africans. But within groups itself, we're looking at even intra-cultural issues, and there are.
Well, let's talk about the police issue, for instance. I know has that issue come across in your consultation so far from African communities?
There are always, issues about issues in terms of African community dealing with police, and some of those cultural issues, some of those understanding how police work and understanding communities work. There's always a bit of conflict in getting to the point. It's not a new issue. It's been around for a while now. The police are aware of it. The community is aware of it. But what we have reached a stage is there is a better dialogue than ever before, where African communities are sitting at the same table with police and try and resolve some of those issues, where before there was a big divide. And I've been to more police activities and programs and functions where police are, focused on trying to resolve those issues. So there's dialogue there. They're talking not just to us, but to the community as well. Because now I was a lawyer 24 years, and I'm fully aware of fairness and equity issues. So for me, it is an important matter to address. Problem of perceived discrimination. These are problems that we want to iron out. But you could be fair to the police. They have worked very hard in the last few years to try and work through those issues.
Do you think that there are grounds for some broad discussion on how African groups are being policed?
It's always open to debate and open for discussion because it's important to bring out these issues because the police don't understand what the concerns are and what are the issues confront African communities, then they're not going to be able to resolve that. So the answer, yes, of course, there are going to be, there's a need for genuine discussion and dialogue in that particular area. Bring out those issues, I think they're important. Now, you might want to take it up with the police, but take it up with us. Because when we sit with the police, we can say, well, to them, we've had cases and cases coming to us on specific areas of policing, and we're concerned about how police is actually dealing with it, and it might be a training issue. It might have to do with the way the police approach certain matters. It could be a cultural issue, it could be an attitude problem that the police may have, and of course, it works both sides. And sometimes it's a question of that cultural perception, and that's why we say to police, when you change your corporate structure, don't move away from that multicultural facet because it's important.
Okay, we'll move away from the police issue because we know it's not necessarily your area of expertise, although it has an aspect of the multiculturalism. Quickly about the youth, I meet a lot of youth groups that feel that they do a lot of things, but they don't get supported in what they do. Is that, I mean, do you agree with that reading?
Well, not entirely. I mean, it's nice to be young, but it's also a time of energy. There are a lot of things you want to do, and the question is, what are the things they're looking at doing that they aren't able to do? In fact, if somebody comes to my table and it's got a youth thing, I'll give it a lot of support. So we need to be specific about saying, what are the issues that youth have? I know it's a general big problem. Youth, always, a lot of issues right across the range. But if they address those issues specifically, we can then at least dovetail our response and solution to those sort of issues.
Some of the issues relating to African youths, they include employment, of course, but many of them feel like there are a lot of barriers between them and the jobs, and some of those are very big barriers that are related to race and discrimination, but no one is calling it the way it ought to be called.
Can I be fair and say it's not just an African community problem? I know it's sometimes appears to be a bigger problem, and there are issues there. There's no doubt about that. But if you look across, it applies equally to an Afghan, to Bhutanese, to South Americans to some degree. And I know the Chin community leaders who aren't getting jobs have been here for 4 years, and the young kids who are having transition problems as well and trying to find jobs. So these are settlement issues, and sometimes it will take time to iron out those issues about trying to get to a position where the employment is going to dovetail into the demands and need as well. Of course, there are issues out there. I've been to the Sudanese function, and I've said I know how difficult it is to try and apply for a job when your name sounds so funny, and no one can pronounce it. And I know there was an attempt, and people were saying maybe we change our name to make it John Smith or whatever, as we get the first interview. And I said, don't do that. That's your heritage. I know it's not easy. The temptation is to run to a very simple solution by changing the name and thinking that, well, if I get fist-based in, we'll solve the problem. That's not the issue. The issue is how to remain sustainable as an employee or having an employee opportunity. And I say to them, don't ever change your name because that's your heritage, that's your culture, that's what we want to preserve in people's lives, who they are, and not change, become somebody else that they're not. And I said to them, don't worry, look at my name, Chin is a body part. I got no problem with commissioner. So, it's a matter of time, it's overcoming those perceptions and difficulties, but it's more about how to get into the system, how to work it. And that's what we're more interested about getting people properly trained for the job. So, if you apply, you end up, my job, well, why not? Get yourself trained up, get yourself to a position, as much as you can. And where the system doesn't allow you to do that, that's where you complain. And so I tried my best to study, and they keep knocking you back. And I tried, and I'm qualified, and I applied for jobs 14 times, I can't get up. I'm happy looking to this and say, well, that person's so well qualified, why aren't we taking that person in?
Well, as we get to almost the end of the interview, I'll just pick on your last point, the fact that it's important to keep one's cultural identity, regardless of some of the issues that maybe that people may be facing from time to time. Would you like to share with us some of your personal story as an Australian of an Asian background?
Actually, I'm pretty multicultural. I mean, to be fair, I mean, my parents were born in China. I was born in Malaysia. Grew up there and did my secondary education there. In Malaysia is an Islamic country. Official religion is Islam. It's got Malays, Muslims, Indians, Chinese. It's got Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, all rolled into one side. Multiculturalism works best when people all have a shared common understanding where they are. The same platform is there for everybody to work from. But on top of that, they enrich this culture and this community because they got additional things. They can speak a second language. They can eat different food, enjoy different religion, and enhance all our continuous capacity to enjoy each other. But important thing is this is another message I go out and talk to people about. We should produce whatever we do in an Australian context. So if you be practicing, Islam or Buddhism or Hinduism, let's do it Aussie style. So we get our own brand, of Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, even Christianity, and it becomes our own. And we know it'll be pretty good because it's based on a multicultural framework. So you can enjoy your background as a Congolese, right? Enjoy a tradition, but there's a context to it. The context is done within Australia. So for me, as a Chinese here, I'm very comfortable. But the important thing is this: if you settle in this country and you own it, if you own it, you will feel comfortable about it. Sometimes there was this debate I had earlier this year about saying, some people use the flag to intimidate. They go around flying the flag in the car. They will wrap around them, and then they tell me we don't belong here because they belong. Well, I'd say to them, why don't you wear your flag? Why don't you wrap it around you? Why don't you fly it? Because if you don't fly and own it, someone's going to own it. So if you own Australia, no one's going to tell you you can't have a right to go around doing what you're supposed to be doing. So I know sometimes it's difficult. You're new, you don't feel comfortable about it, but it's you're no longer a refugee. You're here, you're an Australian. Your rights are equal to mine. You should own this place as much as I own it. And then when you do that, you feel a sense of comfort and assurance that you got more right. Not to say, Chin, what are you doing for the African community? Well, what are you doing for yourself as Australians and exerting your rights? Of course you knew a lot of things you don't used to, a lot of things you need. Well, we're here to supply it in a way we can to try and get you moving on. So in 25 years' time, you'll be a different community from where you are.
What's your last message to the African groups out there?
The African community is a very important community here, as important as the Chinese, because for me, it doesn't matter where you come from. It's important that the African community feel that sense of empowerment and the belief that they have equal rights here as Australians to all the full opportunities that are available to anyone of any background and color. My plea to you is engage a community. We're not here just for funding purposes so that you can have a good party, but we do far more than that, and the serious work of making sure that the community gets the kind of support it needs. Talk to us. There's a whole range of capacity we can access government to be able to deal with issues that you might from time to time feel that you have the resources or the access to. So my message really is, don't in any sense feel that you don't have a place here, because you do. And I want to be able to say in 20 years' time that the African communities have moved on and made a valuable contribution to this country. An area which I think you have a lot of strength in is probably sports. It hasn't been looked at, it hasn't been talked about. But I believe that if we get the African community involved well enough in this particular area, from here on, there'll be no Olympians running a marathon, a long distance, a short middle distance that's not of African background. And I think that'd be a beautiful thing to have in Australia, to have that kind of resource, that kind of asset, and the contribution coming from the African community.